Well, my name is Joe Hiykel, Sr. I have had the privilege of being in the United States Navy between 1951 and 55, and I was on a destroyer, the USS Nicholas. And our ship was reputed to be the most decorated destroyer in the U.S. Navy at that time, and it's since been decommissioned. I was privileged to, our ship was privileged to be present in 1954 at all the hydrogen bomb tests in the Pacific at Aniakchak and Bikini Atolls in the Marshall Islands. And when I say privileged, I say that with tongue in cheek, but actually it was unfortunate that we were there because we're subjected to so much radiation and nuclear fallout. My job was to listen for submarines and to recognize them and to try and identify their country of origin. The hydrogen bombs were the most powerful things that men had devised and still are. And the tests at that time exceeded all expectations. They were up to about 5 times what the scientists had expected they would be, their yield, their intensity, their radiation, and their explosive power. We were in full view, and we were in fully exposed to all the radiation and the explosions and the ionizations and the fallout. And at that time, nobody knew what the consequences of all that radiation would have on us. It wasn't expected to be very much. And the yields on those bombs were in the megatons. Now, the atomic bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which ended World War II, the yield on those was 20 kilotons, which are thousands of tons. The yields on these hydrogen bombs were in the millions of tons. In order to start the hydrogen bomb fusion process, they used an atomic bomb as the trigger. The atomic bomb was attached to the hydrogen bombs to give them the extreme temperatures and pressures that were necessary to start fusion. All the detonations were on a barge, which was just a few feet off of the ocean surface, maybe 4 or 5 feet above the surface of the ocean. The first one went off. We were told to face in the opposite direction and put our arms over our eyes because of the intensity of the glare of the light. We were 35 miles away, and we were told to get the hell out of there. And so we went back to 90 miles away, which was still too close because it was like they were right in front of us, and they were. I swear, or we all did, you could actually see the bones in your arms. And that's what it seemed like at the time. Later, we found out that the radiation was of such quantity and variety that there were X-rays in the radiation, and so we actually were X-rayed. We were approximately 35 miles away from the blast sites, and we were too close. The first thing we saw was a huge smoke ring. I don't think I've ever mentioned this before, but the smoke ring was several miles across, from one end of it to the other, from one side of the circumference of it to the other side, several miles. And it blew up through the clouds. There were cumulus clouds overhead. It went up right through the clouds and came out up in the atmosphere. And that was the surprising thing about these tests. The scientists were actually amazed at the force and the energy that was released. That was something to see. Also, the ionizing effects of the fusion were astounding to see. The colors and the brightness of them. There was an extreme amount of ionization. The colors were ranged anywhere from a deep purple on up through the visible spectrum to bright yellow and white. And some of the effects of the ionization were strange shapes, such as things that looked like a staircase that went up to the sky. It was in color, and of course in anywhere from deep purple to yellow and then bright white. But they were such that you wouldn't want to be there. And I'm surprised that we were there. And I regret that we were there. The Navy, and we were part of it, had evacuated all the natives from the surrounding islands so that they wouldn't be exposed to the radiation and the blasts. And they were only recently allowed to go back to their islands, but their islands are so radiated still that they can't grow any crops there except what's in the ground, what they can plant in the ground, and those things are radiated. They can't eat them because they would be very harmful to them. There were 7 hydrogen bombs exploded in 1954 between January and May. 7 of them, and we were exposed to all of them. I'm trying to recall what it was like, and it was terrible. It was mind-numbing. On our destroyer, we had a crew of about 250, but there were a lot of ships there, aircraft carriers, destroyers, battleships, cruisers. The Navy was well represented there. And every one of the crew members were all exposed to the same things, unfortunately. We experienced all the radiation fallout from every one of those bombs, and the ship was completely exposed and received all that fallout too. So what we knew was that we had to wash the ship down to get rid of all the nuclear fallout that had fallen on the ship. And so to do that, we started the ship's pumps, and we pumped all the seawater we could get all over the ship to wash it down, not realizing that we were washing it down with nuclear fallout, which was a big mistake. There was also a Japanese fishing vessel in the area. I forget the name of it, but I have it in my records. And they were, the crew on the fishing vessel was quite harmed from the radiation. In fact, one of their crew died from the complications of the radiation shortly after the explosions. But we received all the fallout too. We received all the thermonuclear radiation. They mapped it against a map of the United States, and it would have covered about 800 square miles of the United States. That's how much fallout there was. It was a tremendous amount. The explosions made a hole in the ocean's bottom, was in the neighborhood of 600 feet deep, a hole that deep. The Russian hydrogen bomb that was detonated not too long after we did ours was so powerful that it scared everybody. It scared the scientists, it scared the armed forces of the Soviet Union and the United States, and they vowed never to explode another hydrogen bomb, never to build another one, because they were so powerful and so deadly. We didn't have any precautions except to face away from the blasts. We didn't wear any hearing protection or eye or ear protection or protection for our bodies, our skins, so to speak. So we were completely exposed. We don't know what all the results of all that exposure was or what it did to us. We just know that it wasn't good. I didn't experience any recognizable side effects, but my wife and I were married in 1957, just 3 years after the hydrogen. And our first child was a stillborn child, and I believe that that was one of the side effects of the radiation. And also, I lost all my hair and teeth, as you can see. I don't have a lot of teeth left, just a few. So it was anybody's guess as to what the overall results on our bodies and our equipment and our ships were. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and nobody could believe what did happen. Craft carriers and other large vessels. We sent underwater Morse code. I was a sonarman, I should have said at the time. My job was to listen for submarines and to recognize them and to try and identify their country of origin. And we sent universal signals to them to identify themselves, and they didn't return any messages. They refused to identify themselves. They were silent. So we know that they were up to no good being around our task force, and that's why we ran on them, and we received orders to run on them and destroy them. And that's what we did. And depth charges to the side of the ships called K-guns. And the head-thrown weapons that we fired did explode, and they only explode when they make contact. So we know we did damage to the submarine that we were trying to run. And as a matter of fact, the submarine in return fired a torpedo at us. And our ship's captain had the ability and the foresight to turn our ship into the path of the torpedo to give it just the narrowest target area that it could. And it did. The torpedo went down our port side so close that you could have thrown a potato at it and hit it. That's too close.